Pressing a button at the stroke of midnight, Prime Minister Narendra Modi launched India's biggest tax reform from the historic Samvidhan Sadan. It was a luxury welcome for the long-awaited goods and services tax. Ending a 14-year struggle to enlist political support for a move that replaced some 20 federal and state levies and unified the country of 1.4 billion people into one of the world's biggest common markets. The event also condensed years of anticipation, frustration, and a hope into a moment of celebration. A festive air permeated a brilliantly illuminated, flower-bed-decked Parliament building. It took close to 17 years, 3 Prime Ministers and 4 Union Finance Ministers to transform the proposal on GST, first laid out way back in 1999, into an act.
GST न्यू इंडिया की एक टैक्स व्यवस्था है। GST डिजिटल भारत की टैक्स व्यवस्था है। GST सिर्फ ईज ऑफ डूइंग बिजनेस नहीं है, GST वे ऑफ डूइंग बिजनेस की भी एक दिशा दे रहा है। कानून की भाषा में GST गुड्स एंड सर्विस टैक्स के रूप में जाना जाता है, लेकिन GST से जो लाभ मिलने वाले हैं, और इसलिए मैं ये कहूंगा कि कानून भले कहता हो कि गुड्स एंड सर्विस टैक्स, लेकिन हकीकत में ये गुड एंड सिंपल टैक्स है।
Since then, 1.5 lakh crore monthly tax revenues have become new normal, focusing on curbing tax evasion. The number of entities registered to pay the goods and services tax has doubled to 14 million in the 6 years since its inception. In the process of nation building, we often arrive at a moment which leads us to a path-breaking juncture and opens up a plethora of opportunities, imploring us to aspire for new dreams. At the stroke of midnight, Bharat in short, a pioneering future. Hello and a very warm welcome, viewers. You're watching the special presentation of Sansad TV on how GST has proved to be a game changer for Indian economy. GST is not merely a tax reform, but a milestone in realizing Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel's dream of building Ek Bharat, Shresth Bharat. Let's dwell upon the key achievements of this reform. Before 1st of July 2017, Indian indirect tax regime was highly fragmented. Centre and states were separately taxing goods and services. There were many taxes like excise duty, service tax, VAT, CST, purchase tax, entertainment tax, octroi, etc. In addition, there was multiplicity of rates, law and procedures. This caused heavy compliance burden. Imposition of tax on tax was another serious problem. For example, VAT was levied on a value that included excise duty. Input tax credit chain broke as goods moved from one state to another, resulting in hidden costs for the business. Further, pre-GST period, there were tax nakas at every interstate border, creating bottlenecks in interstate transport of goods. As a result, logistics sector remained inefficient and it adversely impacted the businesses. Every state was effectively a distinct market for the industry as well as the consumer. Industry's choice for locating factories or warehouses was heavily influenced by the prevailing tax regime rather than pure business consideration. This made our industry uncompetitive. Therefore, it was a momentous occasion when the goods and services tax, the biggest tax reform of India, was rolled out. GST removed the inefficiencies and complexities of an erstwhile archaic taxation system and helped in accelerating growth. As Prime Minister Modi aptly said, Sardar Patel oversaw the merger of over 500 princely states to catapult India as world's largest democracy while GST integrated them economically. Any such reform would not have been possible without taking each and every state on board. Each state was at a different stage of development, had varied economic activities and priorities, and had distinct source of revenues. More than anything else, they had freedom to frame their indirect tax policies and had discretion in choosing the tax base and rates. While in principle, there may not have been much disagreement to the need of having a GST regime, the issue of pooling in sovereign power of centre and states, coupled with fear of loss of revenue, were real challenges. But foundation of unify the country's markets was laid in 2000 by the then Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee. The visionary that he was, Vajpayee took the lead and set up a high-powered panel to design the right GST model to suit India's diversities and complexities. Public announcement for rollout of GST from 2010 was made in the year 2006. However, no further progress could be made for a long period after this initial announcement, and consensus on real issues remained elusive. GST rollout was postponed. It was only the coming of new government to power in the centre in the year 2014, led by Prime Minister Narendra Modi.
मैं विधि द्वारा स्थापित भारत के संविधान के प्रति सच्ची श्रद्धा और निष्ठा रखूंगा.
He gave the vision of India working together as one to achieve the economic goals of the country. In building this economic future, he emphasized the need for a single tax system across the country. Under this vision and guidance of Prime Minister Modi, it was the painstaking effort of the then Union Finance Minister Arun Jaitley that brought in the consensus among states against all odds. Post 2014, the central government expedited the process, resumed discussions with states and all other stakeholders with new vigor. It began working simultaneously to expedite the process. Two significant initiatives of the Government of India, led by Prime Minister Modi, was creation of the GST Council and assuring the states of a guaranteed revenue flow to them, provided to be decisive in bringing the states on board. Creation of GSTN, a special purpose vehicle by central government for automation of business process with equal participation of centre and states, with its adequate resourcing, was also a major step taken by the central government towards GST. GST is a pro-people reform, hence consumer is at the centre of this reform. Average tax rates in GST have come down. This has been made possible as tax base expanded on rollout of GST and compliance improved. Taxpayers have almost doubled to 14 million. The government has progressively lowered tax rates on essential and daily use items. A finance ministry study suggested that consumers saved at least 4% on their household monthly expenses on an aggregate after GST. Thus, consumer now spends less on daily consumables like cereals, edible oils, sugar, sweets, and snacks. GST ended long queues of trucks and goods carriers at highway toll plazas, freeing goods movement across the states. Nakas, notorious for corruption, restricting and slowing goods and movement, disappeared. Credible studies point to an improvement of over 33% in transport time after GST implementation. Millions of litres in petrol and diesel have also been saved, apart from decongesting arterial roads. Before GST, companies were forced to put up and maintain warehouses in every state due to different taxation slabs. GST does away with the need to have a separate warehouse for every state. This means a leaner and smarter logistics chain. It has encouraged more investments in the sector. In the first 2 years of rollout of business, global players, pension funds have already invested $1.5 billion in India's warehousing business. GST is also expected to boost demand for high tonnage trucks, which shall bring further efficiency in logistics sector. E-way bill has been another innovation in GST. Details of transport of goods is captured in a fully automatic mode, wherein transport details could even be furnished through mobile. E-way bill system has helped government to facilitate monitoring of movement of essential commodities and medical supplies during lockdown necessitated by COVID-19 pandemic. MSMEs have gained significantly in GST. Earlier, VAT exemption and composition scheme thresholds were very small. In GST, threshold has been initially fixed at 20 lakh and has subsequently been increased to 40 lakh for goods. GST introduced a composition scheme which allowed small businesses to pay a fixed rate on their turnover with no paperwork. Hence, small businesses can breathe easy. In addition, GST has opened up new avenues through quick bill discounting and loans to MSMEs. The Trade Receivables E-Discounting System, or TREDS, has been implemented. This has resulted in entrepreneurs. This has enabled entrepreneurs to access credit based on upcoming receivables. This would be allowed where receivables to MSMEs are from identified corporates and central PSCs. Already 500 such companies and 170 CPSCs have registered in TREDS. This has helped thousands of MSMEs. Compliance burdens on MSMEs has reduced significantly, with option of quarterly return filing for taxpayer having annual turnover of 5 crore. GST is the finest example of cooperative federalism in the history of India. It has been unprecedented in sheer scale. Centre and states overcame all the hurdles in the way of GST in complete consensus in the larger interest of the country and its people. The GST Council, a federal body consisting of Union Finance Minister as its chairperson and finance ministers of all states as members, has played its role to perfection. The unanimity of constitutional amendment and the consensus in the GST Council highlights that India can rise above the narrow politics for nation's interest. Tax administration of centre and states are working in close harmony. One of the biggest triumphs associated with GST is the spirit and display of cooperative federalism, with almost all decisions on GST being taken with consensus among members of the GST Council.
This body does not differentiate between big and small states. Everybody's justice has got to be done with the wisdom of this council.
Goods and services tax is a comprehensive indirect tax levied on supply of goods and services in India. Here are some of the salient features of GST. One nation, one tax. GST replaced multiple indirect taxes levied by the central and the state governments, such as the excise duty, service tax, VAT, and others. It brought uniformity in the tax structure across India, eliminating the cascading effect of taxes. Dual structure. GST operates under a dual structure comprising the CGST levied by the central government and the SGST levied by the state governments. In the case of interstate transactions, integrated GST is applicable, which is collected by the central government and apportioned and given to the respective state. Import of goods or services would be treated as interstate supplies and would be subject to RGST in addition to the applicable customs duty. Destination-based tax. GST is a destination-based tax levied at each stage of supply chain, from the manufacturer to the consumer. It is applied to the value addition at each stage, allowing for the seamless flow of credits and reducing the tax burden on the end consumer. Input tax credit. GST allows for the utilization of input tax credit, wherein businesses can claim credit for the tax paid on inputs used in the production or provision of goods and services. This helps avoid double taxation and reduces the overall tax liability. Threshold exemption. Small businesses with a turnover below a specified threshold are exempt from GST. Online compliance. GST introduced an online portal, the Goods and Services Tax Network, for registration, filing of returns, payment of taxes, and other compliance-related activities. It streamlined the process and made it easier for taxpayers to fulfill their obligations. Anti-profiteering measures. To ensure that benefits of GST are passed on to consumers, the government established the National Anti-Profiteering Authority. GST is an evolving tax system. Even established jurisdictions like Australia and New Zealand, which have implemented GST for several decades, continue to debate the merits of their tax systems in order to improve them and accommodate emerging business and capital trends. The vision of a new India, India at 75, and the commitment to net zero by 2070 would be achievable if GST policies are suitably aligned with best practices. From new to improved GST for India, the advent of GST signaled a paradigm shift from the earlier complex system of indirect taxes. The spirit of cooperation among all stakeholders, taxpayers, the tax administration, and the GST Council has guided India's GST journey. A progressive GST regime is a win-win situation for India and its taxpayers on the journey towards becoming a $5 trillion economy. The rollout of the biggest fiscal reform in the world's largest democracy has truly been a game changer for the Indian economy. Well, viewers, that's all we had for you in this edition. Thanks for watching and stay tuned to Sansad TV. Goodbye for now from my side.